Ganesh will be presenting together. This is Aarti Pandey from ThoughtWorks. I work as a principal consultant looking after the enterprise architecture related problems in ThoughtWorks.
And myself, Ganesh Zadav. I'm engineering manager in John Deere India Private Limited. So this is our today's agenda. So how many of you are here from manufacturing background or IoT background? Fine, for all those who are not, you will learn few things from manufacturing background and from IoT domain also. So today's agenda is about how we use Kafka ecosystem in converging manufacturing operation tech stack. We generally refer to as OT stack with information technology. In today's session, we'll talk a little bit about John Deere, our goals around Industry 4.0, the current architecture in the factory, its challenges, the OT connectivity technologies like MQTT and Sparkplug, its key features and limitations, and how we use Kafka ecosystem to build a robust data platform in factory. Then we'll discuss few things around UNS, and then use cases, and then we'll open for Q&A. One disclaimer though, as per guidelines from my organization, we won't be sharing any code snippet as of now or talk in detail about scale. So about John Deere, what we do and how we do it. Actually, I can talk about this slide alone for next 40 minutes. So I request all of you, please do visit deere.com, our YouTube channel, and find out more about our autonomous machineries, our precision agricultural technology, our financial services, our equipments in agricultural, forestry, and construction. So these are our goals. So with more than 50 plus factories across the globe, Deere always tries to adopt new technologies, techniques, and tools to be better at automation, precision control, and monitoring. Our current goal is around implementing Industry 4.0 features and getting ready for next revolution, that is Manufacturing 5.0. Today, we'll be talking about mainly this part: connectivity, industrial, Internet of Things, horizontal and vertical integrations, and IT-OT convergence. We're trying our best to make our factories more data-driven, smarter, and more autonomous. So let's start with the current architecture in the factory. As shown here on left-hand side, this is a manufacturing operation tech stack. So this pyramid on the bottom here, we call it shop floor, where we have sensors, robots, AGVs, cobots, followed by a layer of PLCs, and then we have a control layer of SCADA systems. On top of that, we have IT systems like MES, which is called Manufacturing Execution System, and the ERP system where we do all our plannings. You will see this same stack across all factories. Now, typically the data flow is from shop floor to the top floor. And on the right-hand side, these applications in shop floor, most of the applications talk to each other directly. There is a point-to-point integrations. And these are the challenges because of the nature of these applications. We have hierarchical communications, and again, not real time. Most of the communications are point-to-point, no data contextualization. It is very difficult to get a unified view of data. Convergence of OT and IT is very challenging, and there is additional complexity of edge computing. Now, along with these architectural challenges today, we also identified few capabilities to be enabled if we want to achieve our goals. So this is our list of capabilities. On right-hand side, this is the interesting part where almost all organizations are going for, where we want real-time data analytics, we want real-time data decisioning, we want predictions, we want machine learning. Left-hand side is the challenging part, where we want to connect and collect data from IT systems, OT systems, and OT devices in a real time. We also want to get metadata about all of the systems, and then we want to contextualize that data and make it available for real-time purposes. If you see, this challenging part is actually unified namespace. Is there anyone here or any team here who has implemented unified namespace in their enterprise? Let me show you what unified namespace is. So by definition, unified namespace is a standard method of organizing and labeling the data in your enterprise. and provide a standard interface for communication. It actually integrates both your software solutions and your hardware solutions and organize the data in event-driven architecture. Too theoretical? So let's say this is on right hand side. This is a typical factory layout. So in a factory, we have departments or focus areas. Within that, we have line, and then we have stations. On these stations, people, your devices, all are working. So all of these data producer systems or devices are logically or physically placed on this architecture or this layout. With unified namespace implemented, the data generated by all of these data producers will get organized and labeled in a similar layout. So what are the benefits then? If you visit a factory, and I do recommend because I am also coming from IT background, factories are exciting place to visit. If you do visit factories and talk to the stakeholders within a factory, be it ME engineers, be it the operators which are working on machines, or factory controller managers, and you talk about them about data, these are the typical questions that we get. So one team might come to you and say that, hey, I want to know about the data about specific robot in, let's say, Pune factory, in engine department, on workstation number 1, 2, 3, 4. I really want to know what program this robot is actually executing right now. There are other data points for that specific device. I want to know about its speed. I want to know about the unit of the speed today. I want to know about the schema that is available because I'm writing some IoT application. In traditional way, it will be very difficult because then you have to get the help of your SCADA system, do very point-to-point integration. Again, same story, different version. Another team comes. Let's say there is an IT team who is developing a equipment efficiency application, where these application actually calculates the efficiency of the devices. They might come and say that, hey, we observed a downtime of a specific machine or robot on specific work center. What was the reason? What program that robot was actually executing? What was happening at that workstation? And as I already said, at workstation, you may have all of these data producers working. So to get a real-time view of what's happening now, this team might need a data from, let's say, MES system. Might be need a data from ERP system. What was the plan? What is the current status? What's happening in that workstation? And later on, they might come and say that, can we monitor the data at this workstation for a specific device in a real time for next 1 week? Now, all of these questions will get answered easily if we have a unified namespace implemented. And this is the place where we find out that the systems like Kafka comes in a picture. Now, till now, I have shown you what John Deere, what our goals, architecture challenges, what capabilities we really need, and what unified namespace is. Now, I will hand it over to Aarti to talk about our solution to this, about our data platform, how we use Kafka, and how we actually tackle the problem on this OT layer, because that is the most challenging part of the integration. So over to you, Aarti.
Thank you, Ganesh. So going forward, just a quick show of hands. How many of you here have implemented or maybe worked with UNS concept, or at least have read about it, are familiar about it? So we have audience who has worked on it. That's really good. So yeah, having seen the challenges of as-is architectures, right? And we also saw that the capabilities that we are looking for in order to implement or in order to work towards our goals are something that the UNS actually tries to address, right? And Ganesh showed you all the questions that the OT staff or the shop floor people might have, even the IT staff might have. Now, what kind of architecture or what kind of solution will help us implement this UNS or implement this capabilities, not just UNS, right? All the capabilities that we needed. Let's look at that. But before that, apart from the capabilities that Ganesh mentioned, apart from the UNS attributes that he mentioned, there are a couple of things that we need to consider when building this solution, especially in the context of John Deere. One is there are 50 plus factories that John Deere operates in. And whatever solution we are building, this is a solution to be deployed into a factory, which means we will be deploying it across 50 factories. So whatever solution we create should be considering the constraints at the edge, at the factory floor, right? We may not have as many resources as we have in the cloud or we have in the data centers. Factories will not have as much of compute, memory, storage, everything will be restricted there. Then there are thousands of devices within one factory itself. And many devices use disparate different protocols. Protocols itself is a challenge in terms of getting or connecting the OT devices into something which is centralized, right? So disparate protocols is another challenge. Now, given that John Deere had a focus on open source technologies, any solution that we would propose would need to be using open source technologies. We were not going to be using anything apart from open source. Then whatever solution we build is going to be a platform. Why are we calling it a platform? The reason is we are providing a centralized place where we are storing all the OT data and making it available for all the other IT applications in the shop floor. And that's why it needs to ensure that there are one too many consumers, right? Same data, same OT data. Let's say I have a Fanuc robot and 10 other applications want to consume data from that. Maybe there are applications that need to consume that data in a repeated manner, as Jay and Sean were mentioning it in the morning, that replayable consumption of data is also a very important feature, especially for the AI use cases, right? So one-to-many consumption, delayed consumption, replayable consumption, all of these kind of subscriptions also need to be supported. And of course, because we are talking about manufacturing, because we are talking about shop floor, it has to be resilient and scalable as well, right? And any kind of downtime has a direct impact on the revenue and the operations of the factory. So given these are the requirements that our solution needs to cater to, and given the different capabilities that we looked at, and the concept of UNS, now we need something that will allow us to get the OT data in real time in a streaming fashion into our platform for our consumers to consume it, right? And if we look at what UNS prescribes, it prescribes an event-driven architecture, wherein events or data changes from OT devices flow into an event streaming platform, which are then consumed by different applications, right? And this data is now open for processing, open for contextualization, enrichments, etc., right? Now, Apache Kafka fits in here because, as you can see, the capabilities that are mentioned in yellow towards the bottom of the slide, as well as the requirements that are mentioned in green towards the top of the slide, all of these capabilities, if you look at the Kafka's publish-subscribe model, its scalability, its resilience, its ability to ensure that same data is consumed by multiple consumers, replayable manner, all of that, this is where Kafka as a streaming platform fits as a foundation for our architecture. Now, when we say Kafka fits as a foundation here, because IT data anyway, integrating IT data and IT systems with Kafka, we saw in the morning also, right? That is more or less a common practice. But looking at all these capabilities at the bottom, connectivity, collection, contextualization, stream processing, and serving, not everything is possible just with Kafka. While yes, some of these capabilities most of these are, like for example, collection, contextualization, stream processing, serving and connectivity, especially connectivity because of the disparate protocols, right? Kafka does not directly support integrations with different types of OT protocols that are being used. So in this case, we need something in front of Kafka to be able to get all our IT devices on the shop floor connected with Kafka, right? So if we look at one level deeper view of our architecture, in front of Kafka, we needed an MQTT broker. All the devices, OT devices, PLCs, real-time units, all those things will communicate with the MQTT broker. They will send their state changes and the OT data to the MQTT broker in MQTT format, MQTT spark plug messages, right? And from there, we use custom source connector. Now, why do we need custom source connector? That's because Kafka, open source Kafka, again I'm calling out open source Kafka, doesn't have a open source connector for the MQTT broker, which is why we had to write our own custom source connector to get the OT data from MQTT broker ingested into our Kafka topics. Now, this way, we were able to ingest our OT data into UNS or into our Kafka instance. But what about IT data? Now, IT data integration apparently was not difficult, right? Because we don't have different protocols. We know that microservices and different applications can send business events, and those business events can be published to Kafka. However, there are data silos because of the fact that many applications, IT applications, have important data in their databases. Now, that data also had to be brought into Kafka. That is where we are talking about the OT and IT convergence or OT and IT integration. And in this case, we had to use CDC connectors, different CDC connectors to get the IT data also into UNS Kafka, right? Now, so far so good. We got all the OT data also, we got all the IT data also in Kafka. But that only ensures connectivity. What after connectivity? We need other capabilities like collection, addressability. I need to be able to know where is the data for my robot, as Ganesh was showing in the earlier slide, right? Maybe I have thousands of robots, tens of CNC machines. How do I get data for that quickly? How do I find out where the data is? And post that, I also need to understand the meaning of that data. That's what we meant by contextualization. So for collection, contextualization, streaming, etc., we needed further Kafka ecosystem components. For example, we used stream processors to be able to contextualize this OT data by using metadata from the devices, or also by using, as Ganesh was mentioning, if something happened yesterday between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m., let's say, and I want to correlate between data that was acquired during that time from different MES systems, ERP systems, and the OT devices, I can do that using the stream processing. So that's another Kafka ecosystem component that helped us. Now, once you do contextualization and once you enrich your data, let's say you want to make that data available to your consumer applications. And there are many consumer applications which may need the same data. How do you do that? Right? Not all your databases might have Kafka connectors. So we also had to write some custom connectors, custom sync connectors, in order to get that unified IT/OT contextualized data into a UNS data store, from where we built some UNS APIs that would serve this contextualized unified data to our consumers. That's what the serving layer you see on the right-hand side. And that consumption or that serving of data could happen over APIs, custom APIs that we built, or it was also possible that they can get a direct CDC, or they can also get the events directly from Kafka as a subscription. So that's how the entire manufacturing data platform architecture shaped up. So this is a very logical kind of view of this diagram, showing how Kafka alone was not sufficient. However, when we talk about having MQTT broker for connectivity, right? Because Kafka would not be able to connect. Even MQTT broker and MQTT plus Sparkplug also had a couple of challenges. In the subsequent slides, we'll be sharing what those challenges were. Again, a show of hands. Has anyone used Sparkplug here? No? Okay. So quickly, we don't want to spend a lot of time here, but quickly introducing MQTT is open standard for IoT. Now, on the top, I have mentioned MQTT plus Sparkplug equal to plug and play IoT. That is how the creators of MQTT and Sparkplug have actually defined it. And as you can see on the right-hand side, one of the co-inventors of MQTT, Erlen Nipper, who is also the CTO of Cirrus Link, CTO of Cirrus Link, he mentioned that he's happy that Sparkplug has actually helped bring MQTT to the real domain that it was built for. Now, MQTT was built 25 years ago, and it was built as a SCADA protocol. It was built as an open, freely available standard SCADA protocol to be used for industrial applications, especially in the shop floors, right? And despite that, what we can see today is that MQTT alone is not sufficient, and they had to create Sparkplug. Why? We will see in a short while. But MQTT as such was in our case, we chose MQTT for two reasons. One is because you cannot go ahead with disparate protocols, right? Lot of protocols are being used by devices. You need one standard to be used by your platform. And why MQTT? Because it is a lightweight protocol, especially designed for resource-constrained environments with low bandwidth, and it doesn't enforce any payload structure, etc. for you, very flexible. And not just industrial applications, although it was built for industrial applications, but it has also been proven in other domains like social media, and it has been used at scale. Scale as high as 800 million events per second, etc. So that's the reason we started, we finalized on MQTT. Now, why Sparkplug? As I mentioned, MQTT does not have a couple of things like payload structure. So it's very flexible. And so you need some way of representing your OT data. Your OT data may come from, let's say, one of the lights that you have there, or maybe it may come from one of the CNC machines that you have on the shop floor. So how do you represent a generic schema that will support the data or payload for different devices? So Sparkplug gives you a generic structure for your payload, or your generic encoding for your payload. Secondly, what Sparkplug does is it defines a topic namespace. It actually defines different message formats using which you can share data or you can obtain data from different devices. Thirdly, it also does session management. MQTT kept some of the things open, like how does the session management between the MQTT producer and the MQTT consumer will happen, and how does the broker actually play a part in that. So that part also is taken care of by Sparkplug. Plus, Sparkplug gives a couple of more things like report by exception, which means on resource-constrained environments like factories, you don't want to spend duplicate data or redundant data. You want to ensure whatever you are sending is essential enough so that you are consuming lower bandwidths. So Sparkplug supports that as well. So with all these things, right, Sparkplug essentially complements MQTT for being used for industrial environment in an optimized manner. So that's the reason we went ahead with MQTT plus Sparkplug. Now, we are saying MQTT itself was built for IoT. And again, we are saying Sparkplug augments or complements it, adds few features on top of it. And still, we experienced few challenges even after using MQTT plus Sparkplug. Let's look at what were those challenges and how did we solve those challenges. So this is a typical Sparkplug architecture or infrastructure architecture diagram that shows what are the different components or what are the different roles that exist within a Sparkplug setup, right? So on the rightmost, you can see there are devices. This picture is slightly flipped, but on the rightmost, you can see devices, and devices are connected to something called as edge nodes. So edge nodes are nothing but the MQTT client applications that talk to the MQTT broker. These edge nodes also play a part of local interfacing with different devices. We were talking about connectivity being the biggest challenge when creating a platform like this, and disparate protocols being the reason for that biggest challenge, right? So these disparate protocols are handled by these edge nodes. So edge nodes do the local interfacing using those different protocols, but they talk a single protocol with the MQTT broker. Now edge nodes also play a role of gateways. Whatever messages or whatever state they get from the device, they forward it to the message broker. Now MQTT server is nothing but a message broker, which also interfaces with the edge nodes as well as the host applications on the other side. Now what are host applications? Sparkplug provides, or rather prescribes, host application as a role for the consumer applications because of the way the Sparkplug messages are structured, right? And host applications can also ensure bidirectional communication. So MQTT by itself can ensure that any any producer can produce a message and any consumer can consume it. Sparkplug takes an advantage of that and creates bidirectional stateful communication between the host applications and the devices. So if you have 5 devices sending data, and if you have an application that is sitting on the other end that wants to get the data from those devices, It can also read the data, as well as if it wants to send a command to one of those devices using Sparkplug, that is possible. That is what the role of host application enables. Now, with this architecture, there are two things that happen. One, the kind of messages each of these components sends is also standardized by Sparkplug, and the kind of data that is exchanged by the two is also standardized. Like for example, for devices can send birth messages when they come online. Devices can send their state changes if any of the tags on the devices. So the device attributes or device data is called tags, for those of you who are not from the manufacturing background. So the devices tags are sent as part of DData, and when the device goes offline, there is a DDeath message that gets sent. So these are the device level messages. Similarly, there are edge node level messages, as you can see on the screen, which are communicating the state of edge nodes to the MQTT broker and the other consumers. NBirth, again, node comes online. NDeath, the node goes offline. NData, any change in the state of nodes is communicated using NData. Now, host applications also can send messages. That is where the bidirectional communication comes into picture. Host applications can send their state messages. Now, these are slightly internal things. The state message from the host is actually meant to ensure that one of the applications stays connected, and that becomes the primary application. NCMD and DCMD are the commands. So if a host application wants to send command to a device, it uses DCMD. If it sends a command to a node, it becomes MCMD. So these are the different types of messages that Sparkplug standard has prescribed in order to facilitate the communication. Now, if you quickly look at the different types of messages, right? Different messages communicate the state of same device. If you pick just the device on the top, which is talking about the digital output, right? So that single device, if we want to know the state of that device, we need to look at all the three types of messages that the device is sending. So there is some level of message correlation that needs to happen when we are using Sparkplug. We'll go in detail of that again, which will need stateful processing. Now quickly looking at how a device is identified in Sparkplug, right? Because we may have thousands of devices and we want to know where is the data for my one robot that I'm talking about. So Sparkplug provides IDs, and those IDs follow a specific format. And this format you can see on the screen here. There is a namespace. The namespace defines whether it is a JSON format or whether it is a protobuf format. Plus, as we saw in the infrastructure diagram for components of Sparkplug, there are edge nodes, devices. You can see it on the right-hand side. There are edge nodes, devices. These edge nodes also can be grouped. So typically when we talk about the asset hierarchy in the shop floor, that asset hierarchy has different levels of grouping, right? So one edge node may be connected to 5 different devices, and 5 edge nodes may be part of one department. 3 departments may be part of one area. Something like that. So there is a hierarchical organization of assets into the factory. That can be represented using the group ID. So group can be at any level. We can go in detail about that. But the second component in the ID is about the group ID. Then comes the message type. We just saw in the previous slide that NBirth, NDeath, NData, DBirth, DDeath, and DData are the message types. So that comes as the third component. The fourth component in the Sparkplug message ID is edge node ID, the actual node from where the data is being received. Many times it is either a node or many times it is directly a device as well. We can see that example below. And what to call as edge node is also flexible depending on which particular Sparkplug module or MQTT module are you using. And finally, we have the device ID. So the parts that I have mentioned, device ID, edge node ID, and group ID, those are the parts that are in the controller that are flexible for us as developers to define. The rest of the part, like the namespace and message type, comes as part of the actual message that the device is sending. Now, if you look at these IDs, what does it tell us? It tells us that I can not only identify a device with this ID, but I can also associate it with its physical location, right? For example, I talked about the group ID. Maybe I have defined a group at a, let's say, department level. And then there is an edge node ID. Within that department, I'm putting a station as a edge node. And within that station, there is device which is identifiable. I'm saying Fanuc robot 1234, right? So this kind of Sparkplug naming convention or ID actually allows us to physically locate a particular device. And this gives the addressability. We'll come to that again. So having said that there is this kind of ID, Sparkplug standard along with MQTT also directly maps this ID to a topic namespace in MQTT. So the same ID that you see here, you will have a topic created in MQTT by default when this kind of data, this device starts sending data. And you will find that data in that particular topic. So by having this naming convention and tying the topic namespace to that, they have also enabled auto discoverability automatically. So that's about Sparkplug IDs. Now there is one level of optimization. Imagine that I'm talking about a factory which has thousands of devices. And each device has at least 3 message types, right? So suddenly the MQTT topic namespace on MQTT broker explodes. There are too many topics on MQTT broker. What do we do about it? Not just too many topics, but the number of messages that we are getting per second across all those topics also explodes suddenly. So how do we optimize that? Like let's say I have 1 million devices, right? I am bound to get 1 million messages at least per second, maybe more than that. Now, how do I optimize that? How do I handle that performance, right? I need to be able to get some flexibility in order to group it at some level. Now, so different modules that provide this Sparkplug implementation provide this flexibility. The one that we used, which was created by the inventor of MQTT and Sparkplug, Cirrus Link module, MQTT module, that Cirrus Link module actually allows us to group these messages at different levels. What you can see on the bottom on the slide is either we have device level messages, which is quite default, or we say that I don't want device level messages because I have millions of devices in my factory. I just want the messages at a station level. Or maybe I have too many stations. I don't want those many topics in the MQTT namespace. Instead, I will get area level messages. I don't have too many messages. I can combine them together, have it at an area level. So all that flexibility is also possible with some kind of models. And this comes in very handy, especially when you are deploying it for a factory that has a large number of devices. Now, all said and done, this is about Sparkplug ID and its namespaces. But your data is scattered. What you can see there is, this is dbirth, this is ddata. Now, dbirth and ddata from the same device goes on 2 different namespaces, 2 different topics in MQTT. Now, that is something that requires us to do more processing, right? And we'll also have to join that data. So as I mentioned, dbirth, ddata, and ddata, at least 3 topics for single device, and we'll have to join and correlate that data between these 3 topics. This is where, again, it needs stream processing. Now, contextualization. So if we go back to the capabilities that we were requiring, connectivity, collection, contextualization. So far, we talked about connectivity. So far, we talked about collection of data and being able to identify where that data exists. But what about contextualization? I wanted to know the speed of the robot. I got 1200 as the speed value. But how do I make sense of what unit it is? And at that point of time, what were the other attributes of a robot? Maybe what was its temperature at that point of time? What program was running at that point of time? That is what is contextualization. Now, this contextualization is not possible purely with MQTT broker and Sparkplug. For this, again, we need stream processing. Why? You can see a sequence of data that is coming in as per time. On the left-hand side, you have the timeline. Let's say the node gets online. Then the device gets online. Our Fanuc robot gets online. And it starts sending messages, data messages. It starts sending program. And the speed, let's say program was 821, speed was 200. Speed changed to 1000. Post that, again, speed changed to 1200. Now, what's happening? How do I make sense out of that, right? Am I getting data? Yes, I am getting data. Everything that is changing is available. But how do I make sense out of that, right? And maybe it so happened that temperature went out to 100. And there was an alarm that was set that if the temperature goes up, the alarm should ring. An alarm has been raised. Now I want to understand what happened. Why did the speed go to 1200? What is this 1200 for this particular robot? Is it RPM? It is something else? I need to know that, right? So for these kind of things, right, the complete state of device is not received anywhere. If I had the complete state, I would have an answer then and there that what happened because of which the speed has gone up. So that also has to be computed by looking at the sequence of messages, the data messages that we are getting. So who will do this? Consumer applications, because this is the data that is coming in on MQTT topic. These are all MQTT topics. So any consumer application who wants to get the data for Fanuc Robot 24, first problem is it has to subscribe to all of these topics, right? 3-4 topics. Second problem is even after subscribing to these topics, it has to correlate between these messages and have stateful stream processing in order to understand, okay, what exactly is happening? What is the latest state of my device? There is one more problem in contextualization. We talked about just the message ordering and the subscription required for multiple topics. But how many attributes are there for Sparkplug message? How many attributes are there for my Fanuc robot? Speed went up, temperature went up, temperature caused high temperature caused an alarm, but I don't know what are the other attributes to look at. And how do I get to that? That is where the schema helps us. Schema is nothing but what are all the different tags or data values that my device is publishing. And if required, can I add my custom attributes also to that? And how does Sparkplug and MQTT allow me to define that schema so that I can validate my message and do a quality check also on my messages, right? Schema validation on my messages. So that part is supported with Sparkplug using something called as user-defined types. It is called UDT. It is part of Sparkplug specification itself. And these UDTs allow us to define schema for different types of devices, right? On the left-hand side, you see Fanuc robot and the schema for it. On the right-hand side, you see some different machine, like a Heller CNC machine might have different set of attributes that it is sending. So all of this, different devices and their schema is supported by Sparkplug using this UDTs. But there is a challenge. Sparkplug supports UDTs and allows us to have any kind of schema for any kind of device. So that part is good, but when the data lands in Kafka, how do you ensure that this schema is enforced and this schema is also communicated to your consuming applications? For that, Kafka also, the Kafka topics where you publish the data also needs to understand that schema, right? And Kafka schema registry, can we make use of Kafka schema registry? That was the first question in our mind. Apparently, it looked simple that, yeah, put the schema registry in place and we should be able to validate it. The way Sparkplug is supporting it, Kafka should also support it using schema registry. But the problem was, this schema is dynamic. As we saw in the earlier slide, every message doesn't have all the attributes of a device. Because if we start doing that, we will start consuming a lot of bandwidth and a lot of redundant data will start coming in, which is not needed. So just whatever data has changed, whatever tags have changed, only those tags come into the message, which is why the schema changes every time the data is received. Some of the fields are optional, but just with optional fields also, we cannot use Kafka schema registry. The reason being, schema registry does not understand debirth. So where does the schema come from? The schema comes as part of debirth messages or nbirth messages. When the node comes online, it publishes its schema for different devices. And when the device also comes online, it publishes its schema. So whenever the devices and nodes come online, that particular debirth and de-death message, debirth and nbirth message needs to be known or needs to be parsed by the schema registry. Now, there is no direct support in schema registry for that, which is why, again, we need to have our own stream processor in order to parse these nbirth and debirth messages, collect the schema, and schema keeps changing, right? Tomorrow I go and change the, let's say, add another attribute to my Fanuc robot, which says that where exactly it is located on the station, because I keep moving the Fanuc robot from one station to another station. So all of those changes that go into the schema also need to be versioned, and that part has to be taken care of by a custom stream processor. So this is how I think there are 3-4 challenges that we encountered for which we needed a custom stream processor. So Just to summarize all of the problems that we looked at and how the custom stream processor helped solve those problems, you can see on the left-hand side that for different kinds of devices, there is a topic namespace. What you see here is a topic namespace that has got 6 topics: nbirth, dbirth, ddata, ndata, ddeath, ndeath. These are the 6 topics for one specific robot because we have device level topics now. We can change it to station level or whatever using the optimization. But just as an example, these many topics for one device need to be consumed by our stream processor, and this stream processor will then process these messages like nbirth and dbirth in order to extract the schema, version the schema, and put it in a metadata schema database. Secondly, it also parses the data messages and contextualizes those messages with whatever additional information it has to put in. And then, after having these things processed, it publishes this contextualized data to different topics. You can see there are different, there is a topic with 2 different partitions. Now there also we need to have some scalability related considerations as to how do we partition this data, right? But maybe we can, in the interest of time, we can skip that. All we need to see here is we need custom stream processor in order to handle these 3-4 constraints that we have seen. And if we don't do this, all of this will have to be done by the consuming applications. And we don't have one single consuming application. We have multiple consuming applications. And we cannot have this responsibility left out to the consuming applications. That is why the platform is doing this part here. So to summarize, MQTT plus Sparkplug alone is not sufficient for a real productionizable IIoT platform. What we also need in that is Kafka and its ecosystem like connectors, stream processors, etc. And only then we have something called, we have UNS capabilities along with industrial IoT platform. And if you look at the quote from Kai Weiner, who is the global field CTO of Confluent, he mentioned that in factories, in the industrial setup, Kafka is the new black at the edge. And the reason is the kind of streaming capabilities that Kafka is providing, it's not cutting edge anymore. It has become a necessity, it has become a commonplace and a common need for IoT applications. Yeah, with that, because we started with few questions, I will hand it over to Ganesh so that he can quickly tell us how we had implemented one use case to answer those questions that we looked at in the beginning.
So, okay, I'm sorry. Am I audible? Okay, sorry for that. So once contextualization is done in our platform, we capture the device state, overcoming the challenges of Sparkplug and MQTT, different message types and everything. Once we have data contextualized and API layer, as UNS definition was, it provides a unified interface for communication. That interface is APIs. So this is one application. This is an equipment efficiency application. Now with this, within this application, now I can actually go and use those APIs and see the logical structuring of the data in my factory. So on left hand side, this is a factory, this is my assembly, this is my focus area, this is my department, and within that department there is a one station and I can see all the devices working on that station in real time. Within that station or within that device also, so we are using this platform. This is just one example. All the application will follow the similar pattern or similar architectural pattern to write IoT application or even IT application.